Hello, survivors. Welcome to the State of Decay 2 stream. I'm your host, Geoffrey Card, and, our plan today is just have a chill stream with me and Brant hanging out, talking with you guys. Don't have a lot going on, and I'm lying. Actually, we've got an entire, half a strike team here to reveal what they've been working on since, for the past 3 months? We're talking about the Green Zone team. The people who gave us the Green Zone, they kept working on something else once the Green Zone shipped, and this is the first chance they've had to come and talk to you about it. So, Susan, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all again. For those who don't know, my name is Susan. I'm Strike Team Lead for the Green Team here at Undead Labs. You may be familiar with the Green Zone that we came out with, and like Geoffrey said, while we were in there, we thought we would have the patient open. Might as well add some interesting goodies while we had the patient cracking open before we sewed them up again.
Yeah. So we'll get into all the details of that after we've introduced Brian Giaime. Brian, do you want to show up?
Sure. Hello. My name is Brian Giaime. I'm a system designer over here. Some of you know me for fiddling with numbers and having opinions about those numbers and fiddling with those numbers back again, and then explaining it on Reddit or Discord in these 5-paragraph long diatribes that somehow some of you have the patience to respond to. So thank you all for that, and I'm guessing a few of you are here, so thank you for being here as well.
And then we've also got Anna Lovelace. Anna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Anna Lovelace. I turned caffeine into code. I worked on Green Zone and on this new feature we're going to talk about today.
Yep. So Brian and Susan make a lot of the plans. Anna does a lot of the real work. And that, by the way, she did not assign herself that title. In fact, I'll take that off the screen right now because we did that mostly to prank her. And last but not least, of course, we have Brant Fitzgerald. Brant, do you want to say hi to the audience?
Oh, I suppose. How is everybody? Thanks for joining us today. And there's lots of really cool stuff. So I'm going to not be on the screen because you guys want to hear this.
Yeah, so Brant is mostly here to read the chat. If you guys have questions, feel free to funnel those to us. Our moderators are going to be feeding them to Brant, and Brant's going to be feeding them here to the rest of us. But for right now, why don't I switch over to the game? So I'm playing this little guy named Doof here. We've been running around. I think we are playing right now in the Green Zone. We're kind of imagining here that we are a brand new player, and it's kind of dark out here, but I'm not all that scared because there aren't going to be that many zombies running around. But so Susan, when the team was working on the Green Zone, they had an idea for a follow-up feature. Do you want to kind of give us a little bit of the background and how we ended up where we ended up?
Yeah, absolutely. So game development is always a wild ride. We're solving creative problems, and sometimes we're in the middle of solving one problem, unexpected, really cool solutions pop up. So we were asked by Henry. You guys remember Henry Goffin? You've seen him on the stream before. He said, is there a way to let people switch down to Green Zone without making them reset the map? As some of you know, there's reasons why we have a map refresh every time you change your difficulty. Brian can speak more specifically to that in a hot second. But, we said, well, that's a good idea. I wonder if we can do that. So Henry and Brian and I, and who else was there? Was it Jorgen in that original meeting?
Probably.
We went into a conference room. We went in front of a whiteboard, and we started breaking it down into how can we solve this problem?
Yeah, because there's certain aspects of difficulty, right, where it's like say the number of plague hearts, where all the loot is distributed, that kind of stuff, where you have to basically push the reset button on the map in order to change difficulties, right? And so we needed to find an answer to that particular problem, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Brian, do you want to explain why we need the map refresh on difficulties, just to give people up to speed?
Sure. The simplest answer is the plague hearts, right? One of the things that happens when you change difficulties is we rebuild. We basically refill the map as if you had just gotten there in the post-apocalypse, right? It's full of plague hearts. There's very few, if any, enclaves. The sites that are meant to be there for you to loot haven't been looted, so it doesn't look like anybody's been here yet. Just the zombies and the plague have been sort of simmering and getting worse. And then depending on difficulty, the map is in a different state, right? There's either more or less loot, or there's more or less plague hearts.
Yeah, and so basically, if you wanted to change difficulty, we were kind of stuck. We had to reset the map because that's the only way to make those difficulty-related changes. So what solution did we come up with to make it easier to change difficulties if a player ends up feeling like the game is too hard when they first get started?
Well, our solution was to create a brand new feature that a lot of you have been asking for a long time. Geoffrey, fire it up. We are adding sliders for difficulties of the State of Decay 2. Woohoo!
So let me quickly. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to hide Susan a little bit so you folks can see this entire screen. Maybe I should actually duck out of frame too. So this is the difficulty selection screen. We've got 3 different difficulties. Now, if you like the old way, of course, you can always go back to the old way, choose your difficulty like you always have in the past. But if what you want is a little bit more control and the ability to change your difficulty without resetting the entire map, this is the feature you're going to want. So we've got action difficulty, community difficulty, and map difficulty are the 3 things that you can set independently. So why don't we start with action difficulty, get some folks back on the screen again, and talk a little bit about what went into action. Brian, do you want to like sort of address what the action difficulty slider is all about?
Sure. So I'm sure some of you have already screen grabbed and are desperately trying to read that faster than I can talk. There's 2 big parts to action difficulty: the amount of enemies you face, and then the challenge of facing those enemies. Previously, if you set your difficulty to Dread or Nightmare, you'd see Plague or Blood Plague Juggernauts instead of normal Juggernauts. If your action difficulty is set to Dread or Nightmare, that will still be true, right? It's the same rules as before, but we've sort of split it into 3 categories. So you can turn parts of Dread and Nightmare on while leaving some things at standard or green, and you can customize it how you like. So if you want to face the hardest enemies we have, if you want to face them with higher stamina costs, where Blood Plague does more damage to you, where hostile enemies will do more damage to you with melee or ranged attacks, then you want Dread or Nightmare for your action difficulty. If you tried out the green zone and you liked how combat was a little bit less overwhelming, there were both fewer zombies and also it was easier to fight them, then you can keep your action difficulty down at green.
So right now we are at green action difficulty. And so I'm going to turn on my headlights here and maybe drive over near a Plague Heart and sort of, remind everybody what it's like to play this game on green zone with the action difficulty set to green. Now, we've got our snipers taking out as many zombies as they can. See, I'm driving right by a Plague Heart. Those zombies that were just killed by my snipers, they're kind of it. Now, okay, there's a few here. But you know what? I'm kind of not too worried about them. They're not doing a ton of damage to my car. Oh man, I got hit by a bloater. That's kind of bad. But you know what? I'm still not all that worried about it. I'm firing guns badly. And that wasn't really too much of a threat, even with the bloater. So as soon as the bloater cloud calms down, I'm going to get back in this car and drive back to my base. And then let's switch it over to Nightmare and see if things are any different. You notice you can't even really tell. There's a slight kind of torque to my torque. What do you call it? What's the word for twisting metal on a car? Anyway, there's a slight little dent in my hood there. That's pretty much all that happened hitting those zombies, and I'm kind of still doing fine. So let's open up our difficulty settings and switch it all the way up to Nightmare, the maximum setting. Hit accept, and then okay. Now it warns me, changing any difficulty slider resets all unsaved mission progress. So what that means is, actually, Brian, do you want to explain exactly what happens, Brian or Anna?
Yeah, so this is exactly like if you saved your game and then reloaded it with the new difficulty settings. So anything that you would lose if you just like quit out to the main menu, you would lose here when you change difficulties, which is just like your current mission progress, but everything else you should keep.
Yeah, so for instance, that's the only way we could do things like reset the zombie population and stuff like that based on the action difficulty. But the thing that doesn't happen is we don't lose our base, we don't lose our outposts, we don't lose our enclaves, we don't lose our mission progress so far. None of that goes away. It's just, our progress through the larger arcs we don't lose. It's just basically, like Anna said, like if you quit out and you came back. So there's a short loading screen, and then we're going to be back right where we were in just a moment. Our expectation is you won't be doing this that often. So what?
There's a question about how this will affect legacies.
Oh yeah, we are going to get to that. Let's answer that in just once we test out the combat. We will absolutely jump on that. Though actually, yeah, I guess if it's taking a second. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now we're back. I'm standing right where I was. I've still got my base. I've still got all of my outposts. We didn't reset the map, but now combat is a nightmare. So let's drive back over to where that Plague Heart was and see what kind of trouble we can get into now. So it takes a second, I think, for the zombies to respawn once we get started. But oh, there's somebody. Yeah. So, hey, buddy, I'm right here. Okay, that guy was a dud. Oh, here's this one. Okay, there we go. Oh, okay.
No,
So
he was yelling. He was bringing in friends.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I guess he was. Hey there, everybody. Oh, I'm all out of bullets. Oh, no. So one thing you'll notice is these guys, they're going to be doing a lot more plague damage to me than usual. Swinging my weapon, I'm now doing, taking nightmare levels of stamina hits every time I fire. Every time I swing. Look at the damage they're doing to me. It's harder to take them down. Like, everything about this, we're now definitely in a nightmare zone. And if I stick... Oh, crap! Oh, am I actually going to get Doof killed right now? So if we stick around here long enough, we can see a Blood Plague Juggernaut. We can see all kinds of... Notice how frequently they're dropping their plague samples, though. Those of you who've been playing on Nightmare... You're pretty used to how infrequently plague samples drop, right? This is ridiculous. Oh, wow. Look at all those plague zombies coming after me. This is a ridiculous number of plague samples, and there's a good reason for that. It's because, even though action is a nightmare difficulty, is it community, Brian, that determines... Oh, gosh!
Plague samples, it's map.
Okay, cool. So plague samples is on the map. But yeah, because that's all about scarcity, right? It's about how hard it is to find stuff on the map. So, plague samples is on map difficulty. So, since I'm currently on green map, I'm able to... Oh, my gosh, what is going on? Okay, hold on.
See, now, this looks like Nightmare.
This looks like
feels
Nightmare.
About right. I remember this.
Everyone's on my car already. Can I even get moving before it, catches fire? Okay. So remember, I plowed through a bunch of zombies before. Didn't even dent anything. I'm already denting the car up. I haven't even hit half these guys yet. Oh, there's a feral, of course. Oh, no. Get off my car. Oh, dang it. He pulled the door off before I could do anything about it. All right. I gotta get away. These guys are too tough. Getting out of here. My car is completely wrecked. My character is wrecked. Everything is wrecked. We are definitely a nightmare.
And yet you have a giant pile of stuff, so it looks to me like you have nightmare combat and green everything else.
Yep. So, all right. So we just... Okay, I'm going to hide in here, let my friends deal with all the problems. Maybe I'll actually switch characters. I'll switch over to Veronica here. Let's take control of Veronica. She's up on the roof. She's pretty safe. I'll be her for a second. So, all right. So that was... action difficulty. And so real quick, I'm just going to, so that people can get really, really nice screenshots, I'm going to take us off the screen and let you see all 4 of the settings. So if anybody wants to grab beautiful screenshots of action difficulty, here you go. So that's action difficulty. That's pretty comprehensible. Now, I got some questions about community difficulty. So what is community difficulty about? What happens here? Anybody wants to take this, go for it. I should have planned it out. Maybe Brian's a good one. Sorry, I should just designate people. That's way harder.
We'll figure it out. So as you can see here, there's 3 big categories. There's dealing with your survivors, dealing with your base, and dealing with crafting stuff and weapons. So as you can see at the top there, your skills, when your community difficulty is low, will improve faster. Your survivors consume less food. They get a morale bonus. This is what you might remember from Green Zone, but survivors don't get into fights. They don't waste resources. You even get new recruits showing up to your base. Influence and standing is gained faster. The costs at your facilities are lower. And in Green specifically, your weapons also cost, or they take longer to break. And it takes less resources to craft them. Going up to Standard, we turn fights back on. Your characters have the chance to waste resources. You have to start thinking about morale when community difficulty is at Standard. Right? We like to think about community difficulty like how hard is it to maintain a happy, healthy community, right? And so are people constantly getting into fights, or are they at peace? Does it take a lot of resources to keep them happy and to keep them well supplied, or are you constantly just churning through whatever you've got? And so when community difficulty is set all the way up to Nightmare, you have a big morale penalty. People getting into fights all the time. They might waste their resources. Every decision you make about what facility to upgrade is going to be a lot more significant. You have to think a little more carefully about it. And so if you want your game to be about that sort of maintenance and happiness of your community, then you can dial this one all the way up and keep the others down, and that's going to be where your focus is.
Yeah, so And this is also a good opportunity, keeping Brian hidden for just a second, to answer the question that came up earlier that Brant mentioned. The question is, how does this affect legacies and boons and achievements? So one thing you'll notice is right now, up there at the top of the screen, it says boon and achievement difficulty is set to green. That's because we started this game at green difficulty, and when we raised the difficulty, the only thing we raised was nightmare. Was action, and we left everything else down. So if we want that difficulty to be set higher, we have to raise everything up high. So like, for instance, if we want to get nightmare boons and achievements that require nightmare, we have to move all these sliders up to nightmare. If we want to get ones that are set to dread, we have to at least have, like, everything has to be at least dread or higher. We can have some in nightmare, but everything has to be at least dread. And similarly, the lowest, basically if we look at just the lowest slider, that tells you what your boon and achievement difficulty is set to. And there's a really good reason for that. Let me accept this real quick so we can check out... I'll do that in a second. So basically, the reason we did that was because we know there's a lot of people who've put a lot of time and effort into unlocking things on dread and nightmare difficulties. The True Grit achievement, for instance, seems to be like one of these things where people will talk about. It's almost like a coming of age moment when someone completes a True Grit achievement and survives for 100 days on dread or nightmare. And the thing we didn't want to do was invalidate that. We didn't want to make that feel like, oh, well, now that there's difficulty sliders, somebody can just, set nightmare to something and then set everything else to green, and they can get all the same achievements that people used to get before. Instead, you have to do the same. You have to face the same challenge that other people faced before you if you want to get the same achievements that people already have. And so that means that basically you have to have everything set up, at least at the minimum, to the difficulty level that was originally required in order to get the achievement or the boon. So that's how the boons and legacies work, and that's also how the achievements work. So so we do have another. Let's see here. Actually, real quick before we get to any more questions, we should let's have a look at some of the things that would stand out to somebody as like what's different in green. So right now we're in green community. So Brian, is it like morale is one place where we should be able to immediately tell where we are, right?
Yep, you'll see a bonus right there, hopeful survivors.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so you can see here my morale is at 27. So my folks are actually considering that I've done very little to make them happy, because this is just a brand new cheated out community. I've done very little to make them happy, and they're already doing pretty well. And you said like weapon maintenance is another thing, which we can't easily show right now. But that's another one that, like if I hit a bunch of people with this machete, in Nightmare, if I were set to Nightmare community, that would take forever to it would go down really quickly. Sorry, it would go down really quickly in durability. But here in green, it'll just take forever, and I can just wail on people for a really long time without any problems. Is there anything else that'll stand out really clearly whenever I switch?
If you have an empty base, claiming a new base also costs a lot more outside of green. The influence prices are discounted there. You'll also maybe notice the food consumption if you specifically go from green to standard or from nightmare back down. That's
a good one. Yeah, let's look at our food consumption. So right now, I'm actually satisfying people's food needs completely. In fact, I'm making a profit on food. People are only eating 4.5 a day, but I've got a garden which is giving us 3 a day, and 2 food outposts which are each giving us 1.5 a day. And so we'll have to. We'll have to see what happens when we switch over to Nightmare. So let's do that. Let's switch over to Nightmare Community. So switch this up here. Again, like before, we hit accept, and after we confirm this, we go to the same kind of loading screen that we had before. We are not resetting our entire map. In fact, we had a question. Vision Turd 15, love the name, asks, do we lose our cars? So they already saw that yellow sports car that I was driving around. When we changed action difficulty, I didn't lose it. Brian, the distribution of vehicles, is that on the map difficulty?
Yes. So it's one of those things where, if you've played the game a lot, your ability to find weapons or find cars really affects how powerful you are in a strong way. And so that's one of the things that's on the map difficulty, right? Because it is implicit in the state of the map that you come to, how much of a challenge you're going to face there. And so one of the ways we can make the game harder is by having you have access to less cars and have to overcome more play carts, and vice versa.
Gotcha. So right now we can tell. So now we switch to Nightmare difficulty. We can immediately tell whoa, my morale is way worse than it was before, and everything else is going down too. And so there's basically all of the stuff that has to do with the effort it takes to maintain your stuff. Feeding your people, keeping your morale high, keeping your weapons in good repair. All that stuff is suddenly way harder when you set community to nightmare. And so you can start to think of the possibilities here, right? Like if you are somebody who just absolutely loves the combat, want to challenge yourself to the utmost degree with the combat, but you actually don't want to be worrying about resources all the time. You don't want to feel like the resource, like the need for food and the need for all these resources, the need to keep all your weapons in good repair. That all of that stuff, if you feel like that's dragging down the experience you want to have, then what you want is community set to green and action set to nightmare. Whereas if you want, a bit more of a relaxed, chill experience, you're not really worried about losing your characters, but you do want to really challenge yourself when it comes to, keeping them happy and keeping them fed, then maybe you want action difficulty at green and community difficulty at nightmare. Is that a fair assessment, Brian, of how this thing works?
Yeah, I mean, what we've come to understand as we've sort of watched the game and the audience grow is that different people really thrive in different environments, right? They have different parts of the game that they loved and parts of the game that maybe are more challenging for them. And so the idea here is to let you figure out what is the zombie survival fantasy you want to experience and just to let you dial right into it.
So with that established, let's have a look at map difficulty. So what is kept on the map difficulty slider? Brian, if you want to jump in with that.
Sure. Yeah, I want to leave space for others, but
yeah, no, I realize
a lot of time fiddling with the numbers on this.
Our wheelhouse. Brian and I went through a really long process of separating what goes into each of the three categories. Obviously, some things make a lot of sense, and some things we had to make executive decisions on where they lived, so it's consistent. So I'll let Brian take this away. It was his vivid.
Yeah, a good example of that, by the way, is plague sample dropping. Right? Like, I think we had a big discussion about that because on one side you think of it as like, well, plague sample drops are a result of combat. And so it feels like maybe it's surprise for combat, but it's maintaining a resource. So maybe it's on community, but there's certain, there's certain crafting stuff that goes on the community slider, but there's also stuff that goes on the map slider. And so it was kind of, there was a lot of different questions there, but we ended up putting that particular one on the map slider. Was that right, Brian?
That's correct. So the way that I ultimately came to understand it is that community difficulty is best realized by affecting how much things cost, and map difficulty really thrives on figuring out how much of a thing is available, right? And so like sometimes people think of an apocalypse where you found sort of unspoiled territory, but you still have to build something out of it, and the survival challenge for them is like, what am I going to make out of what I found? For others, it's about dealing with the absence of stuff, right? It's I want to try and figure out if I can squeeze by in a world where there's almost nothing there. And so you don't necessarily want it to be so hard to keep people happy in that environment, but you still don't want to live through this experience of like, well, there seems to be enough food for everybody. It doesn't feel like the apocalypse to me. And so the idea here is you can sort of dial into which version of that makes the most sense for you. And also, as you come to understand the game, like, stuff like how many play carts do I want to have to deal with before I can legacy? What is the prevalence of cars in my experience? Like the map difficulty is also sort of a catch-all for everything that has to be built into the state of the map, where once you've started playing on it, we can't exactly change it, right? We can't add cars once you've been playing because we'd have to disambiguate between the ones that you've driven and that are damaged, spawning any new ones that are there for missions. This is a big open-ended simulation. And so the way that we can keep it all tidy is to do a lot up front and then make a decision saying, okay, we're done affecting that. So those things all live on the map.
Yeah, so we actually had a question from Bearded Casual that says, so you're a Nightmare player, but you want nice vehicles. You just dial back the difficulty, get your vehicles, then put it back to Nightmare, and you keep the vehicles? So there's a couple different ways you could approach that, right? One is you could play long-term with just map difficulty set to green and everything else set to Nightmare, at which point, you won't be necessarily getting Nightmare-level achievements, but you'll have all the cars you want in the world because the map will spawn with all those cars. Another, if you actually want to be playing long-term with map difficulty set to Nightmare, what you can do is set it to green, gather all of the cars that you want, put them in your parking spaces, and then switch to Nightmare map. And you still get to, it's just like, remember, switching difficulties, even in the worst case scenario, is no different from moving maps. And so the stuff you get to keep when you move maps, like the vehicles in your parking spots, you get to keep when you're switching difficulties. So why don't we actually, let's real quick, let's look at the map. Get a sense of what this map looks like right now. So I've got my base, I've got 3 outposts, and I've got 9 plague hearts. scattered around. This is because I started this game on green zone across the board, and this is what you get when you start a map in green zone. But let's switch the difficulty now to, let's say, Dread Zone and everything, because that's actually where I play when I'm at home. Let's switch everything to Dread Zone, including the map. And you'll notice that there's a little warning here. Note, this change will relocate your community to a new version of the same map. What that means is we're actually about to have the same, like, the destructive changes that would happen before when you switch difficulties, they're going to happen now. And we give you plenty of warning, so you know exactly what you're getting into. So I'm going to hold the confirm button. And now we're going to do probably a slightly longer loading screen while we try to get there. Oh, interesting. So One Lump says, are the Plague Hearts randomized? Is there a cap? I switched map in Nightmare, and I had 28 Plague Hearts, which was a new high. I think 28 might be a bug. That 28 feels like it's a lot. This is the... Yeah, go ahead.
Are they playing a modded game? I mean...
That's entirely possible.
That's where we see that problem crop up a lot. If you've participated in modded games and things like that, it's possible to get too many Plague Hearts.
So that would make a lot of sense.
If you're not playing a modded game, then yeah, it's a bug on our end.
So now we have advanced to a Dread map difficulty, and you'll notice there's a lot more than 9 Plague Hearts on this map. And you'll notice I'm not at my base anymore. That original base that I had and those 3 outposts that I claimed, they're gone. So changing map difficulty it has the same rules as changing difficulty before. It's basically starting your campaign over on a new map. But and you can see here, note that Dread Zone used to actually have a lot fewer Plague Hearts. There's actually one of the comments that happened during the pre-stream today. Somebody was asking, can you raise the number of Plague Hearts in the Dread Zone? Because originally, Brian, how did it work? Was it that Green Zone had the lowest number, but then it went up for Standard and then down for Dread?
Yeah, so this is a fun artifact of the way we developed these, where the original ideas for the difficulty zones were really treating each one sort of like a self-contained experience. And I remember when we first put Dread together, we got some feedback that a lot of folks were playing it and they found that the Plague Heart fights were starting to drag on. And so we pulled the number back down. And then when we came to develop Nightmare later, like the audience for Nightmare was like, I don't feel that way at all. I want all the Plague Hearts I can get. I want crazy levels of zombie plague presence everywhere we can put it. And so it went back up for Nightmare. And then as a part of this, and this just makes me so happy that we got to fix this. We took a look at this sort of wide array of places these tunings had been in and said, all right, let's line these up. Let's make them nice and clear and make a nice, simple relationship where as the slider goes up, so does the number of Plague Hearts. And that is wonderfully true now.
Yeah, so, and this isn't the only place where we did that. Where we basically looked at something like for instance, influence rewards for fighting. That was another thing where, was it right that like you used to get the most influence rewards for fights for combat, for destroying zombies at Nightmare, and lower influence rewards on green. But now that we're dividing it up and your resource rewards are on a different slider from the combat difficulty, that didn't make any sense anymore, right?
Exactly. So that actually means that Nightmare after this goes live will be harder than Nightmare before, because it is now a holistic Nightmare where all the numbers went down or up depending on what made the game more challenging. Instead of us looking at Nightmare as a unique twist on the game where combat is like more risk or reward, Nightmare's just more challenging now. And so if you want Nightmare, but you still want to be earning crazy amounts of influence, you can slide your community down to Standard or Green. But if you try full Nightmare now, it will actually be a little bit more of a challenge for how well you know the game, how well you can utilize the resources and facilities and characters and things available to you, because those numbers now descend in a clean fashion.
Yeah, so basically, if you want to have the influence bonanza that you used to have on Nightmare, what you probably want is action difficulty set to Nightmare, community difficulty set to Standard or Green. And then, if you have community all the way down, that means your influence rewards for combat have shot way up. So at Nightmare Action, you have tons of zombies, and at Green difficulty, each of those zombies gets you a bunch more influence. So you could just tank up on influence with this setting, and then later on move community difficulty up there, but you've got all the influence that you wanted to buy your outposts, or you go to the mysterious wandering trader, or whatever it is you wanted to do with it. So now we're on a new map. So you'll notice that I'm back at my old base, at sort of the original starter base. If I look over at my I've just got the base is in its original condition. I've got my whole community still, though, so at least I got a lot of people to help me work on this. I can, instead of having to just pick one thing at a time, I've got 8 people who can help me clear out all this stuff and get ready for my, get ready to start surviving in the Dread Zone. Let's look at. We had that question about vehicles. Let's poke around here. So remember we had that yellow sports car that we got in the green zone. Let's see if we've still got it now that we've moved into that map. Ooh. Oh crap! I didn't keep it. Oh, there it is.
Did
I
you
was scared for
put
a
the
second.
parking spot?
Okay, yeah. So it happens near my parking lot, but not in my parking lot. So yeah, so we've still got the same green car. I mean, same. Why do I think it's a green car? The same yellow car that is. It's in the same condition it was in before. So I got to keep it. So bear that in mind if you're looking to like collect a bunch of cards in green and then move into Nightmare. This is how you do it. You just saw it.
Someone in the chat had a quick question asking if these bespoke difficulties are also available when you start a new game, and the answer is yes.
Yes, actually, that's one thing I was going to do. Let me just I'm going to exit to the main menu right now and go out to do it. Susan, while I'm getting set up for the front end, do you want to talk? So part of our motivation was to make this easier for brand new players to sort of choose their right difficulty without any kind of destructive consequences. Part of the reason for this is because players have just been asking for this feature. It's on our wish list. In fact, we get to check off a lot of wish list items just with this one feature. But also, I think accessibility was another sort of concern, right? That we wanted to address. Do you want to talk about that a little bit while I get set up?
Sure, absolutely. So as we mentioned on the last stream I was on, we had an accessibility summit in January where we brought in a whole panel of gamers with a wide variety of disabilities to come tell us directly about the needs that they need to be able to play games just like everybody else. And the beauty of making a game more accessible makes it better for truly everybody, right? And so we had a couple of fantastic individuals that we interviewed, and one of them specifically asked for sliders by name. He said, I want to be able to take down the combat and everything else so I can focus on the survival sim and getting resources and playing with that part of it. It's just because my hands are shaky and it's really hard for me to do Twitch, gaming. So shooting is really tough for me. So, but I still love this whole aspect of your game. So I'm incredibly thrilled. Actually, I was going to draft an email to him later this week now that it's public and we told all of y'all that it announced to be like, look, we did the thing that you wanted. So it's wonderful to be able to do that.
So when you're starting a brand new game, you start like we always do, selecting your map. Let's pick Meager Valley, and then we've got choose your difficulty. Now this is a different screen than what we had before, but it's not that different right now. You see that. So somebody who's brand new to the game maybe doesn't want to be just suddenly assaulted with the sheer complexity of those difficulty sliders. They've just got this very simple, straightforward set of choices they can make. But I am concealing a special button that we've added now. So go down here to Advanced Settings, hit that, and now we get the full range of options here. So we can, set community down to green, action up to nightmare, and map up, let's say, dread, and accept. And so now we're going to get to, start a whole new game. So because I'm playing a dev build, I think it might put me through a weird screen. Yeah, boink, 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 whatever.
Hey, Geoffrey, while we're waiting, we've got a good question for Anna here. How does that work when joining a multiplayer game? How are you going to know what you're getting into if you're joining somebody else's game?
So all of these settings are supported in multiplayer, just like you'd expect. We currently in the game have a warning that tells you if the game that you're joining has a higher difficulty than the one you're currently on. So when this goes live, that warning will be tied to the action slider because that's the one that affects you the most as a visiting player.
And that actually also reminds me a little bit of, there's another question from Airy Twitch. What about new community members? Will they be better or easier to get? So I think, Brian, you advocated for a particular feature back when Green Zone was introduced. Is that right?
Yeah, and so that is still there, and it has now been lined up with a green community difficulty, where if you are playing with your community difficulty set to green and your morale is above a certain threshold, I want to say it's like as soon as it's in the green, characters will, in the morning, if your morale is high enough, they will basically just show up and say, hey, I need a place to live. Are you recruiting right now? And so if you need more recruits, you can put your community difficulty down to green, and that'll just give you new survivors about once a day.
And there's also, I mean, we've really sort of been paying attention a lot to the feedback people give us about, how difficult it is to find new recruits sometimes, especially if you're looking for particular skills, things like that. And we've got some long-term plans in place. We'll be able to talk in a couple of weeks about some short-term plans we have to make it a little bit easier to get recruits than it currently is. We've also got some long-term plans along those lines that maybe it'll be a few months before we can talk about them. But we do really we hear the message from the audience that wanting to basically have more choices when it comes to who you can recruit and how quickly you can recruit. That seems to be a thing that the audience really is looking for. And so we're listening to that, and we've got some ideas. Not all of them are immediately ready to share right now, but we are definitely thinking down along those lines. So one aspect of the game that is also getting a little, since we cracked open difficulty, since we had the patient open, like Susan likes to say, it's not only sort of the difficulty, the way that the difficulty screen affects difficulty that we've been messing with. Brian, you've also been messing with the way that difficulty advances over time. Playing the game. Do you want to sort of because I know this is one thing we've been cagey about for a really long time, not really giving players the details about how difficulty progresses, because we didn't want them to be gaming it too much. But now that we've sort of really kind of pushed the reset button on difficulty and done a lot of sort of work studying how players play and what actually happens, we've made some changes, and I think we're ready to sort of share with people how stuff works.
Yes, this one's been sort of behind the curtain for a long time. I'm actually really happy to finally talk about it. Also, I believe there are graphs. I get to show you all graphs.
Yes, we've got graphs.
I do love the graphs. All right, so I'm going to open just with what the heck actually happens here. Ooh, okay, we started with the cool one.
Yes.
So, whenever you kill when you kill zombies, when you kill a Juggernaut, when you kill a Plague Heart, when you complete a mission, when you clear an infestation, when you defeat a hostile enclave, you gain standing. Y'all probably know this already. This is how your characters get up to hero and what lets you promote them to a leader. What you didn't know is that we're secretly tallying up all the standing you've ever earned on all of your characters. And that gives us a little invisible number in the background that's like the record highest standing your community's ever had. That little magic number gets plugged into a whole bunch of systems, and we use it to make the game harder. It turns on the appearance of the different enemy types. It turns up the total amount of enemies that show up on screen. So as you can see on this wonderful, colorful ribbon graph.
It's probably a little bit hard to read the axes, and so I'm going to probably say out loud, this x-axis right here, this is your highest recorded community standing that we've got right here. And then the vertical axis is how many enemies show up in the game.
Yep, and it's super fuzzy in the top middle, but each of those colors reflects a different enemy type. And so as the highest recorded standing goes up, we introduce new enemies, and then we increase the total number of each enemy type that's allowed to show up. We even do stuff like we turn off the small hordes around 2,500 to replace them with big hordes. We turn the total of small hordes down from 2 to 1 so we can add a big horde, and later the small hordes disappear completely and are completely replaced by the larger hordes. And so what you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen is something like day 10 to 14 in the current tuning, depending on the data that we've got and how you play the game. Whereas, the first 0 to 2,000 is like day 0 to 3 or 3 to 4, depending on how you play the game. So in the beginning, less enemies, less hard enemies, smaller hordes. Towards the end of the game, more enemies, harder enemies, bigger hordes.
So this is what the data, you drew this graph from the data as it exists at update 21, right?
Yes.
But this has actually changed a little bit from the way that it used to work back before. But before, the way it currently works in the game that people are playing in their homes right now.
Yes. So it took us a long time to finally get the telemetry to a place where we could really do some analysis on this. But long story short, people were earning standing at twice the rate we had originally expected. And so right at that 4,000 mark there, that used to be where everything hit its peak. And that was around day 5 to 8, depending on how you played the game in standard. And so one of the things that we've done with this update is we've doubled the amount of standing you have to earn to see the enemy difficulty max out. So the game the theory here is that it can stay fresh for longer because we've taken stuff, and rather than add a bloater and a screamer and a feral and a horde all at the same day, those things are now spaced out. And so each day should have a couple of distinct differences, but you shouldn't see the game have a tsunami of additional difficulty overnight if you happen to kill 3 or 4 plague hearts in that day. It should take a little longer to get there, and so the game should keep responding to your actions for longer.
Okay, yeah. So basically, originally, we because we based this on something that was not time. We based it on the player's actual progress. So the players who progress more slowly would see difficulty go up more slowly, and players who progress more quickly would see difficulty go up more quickly. But because it wasn't based on time, we couldn't really accurately predict how long it would take somebody to max out the difficulty, to max out the number of zombies that were in their world. And so once we actually did get that information, we saw people were progressing twice as fast as we thought. And so now we've stretched it out. So now if you are used to Nightmare maxing out, like at day 5 or 6, maxing out the number of hordes and number of zombies and the variety of enemies, if you're used to maxing out after 5 or 6 days, now it'll actually take more like a couple of weeks of game time. Was that about accurate?
Roughly. Nightmare is still the fastest one to get to its peak difficulty. We talked to a lot of folks internally who spend a lot of their time there, and in many cases that was sought after. Right? People don't want to feel safe to get that Nightmare experience, but we still want the game to feel like it can stay fresh for you. And so it's still more spread out, but Nightmare will still ramp up faster than the other difficulties.
Yeah, so it was information like this that you were looking at to sort of like analyze. This graph is based on what players have actually been doing. You can see that sort of we've got the standing that people accrue as they progress through the game, and then the different basically when they tend to hit those levels. And so as you can see, like day 1 and day 2 are almost about the same in terms of the enemies that show up. But it's as you get to day 13, you start maxing it out. Is that accurate?
Yep. We're also that blue line represents the total enemies that are during the day and also additional enemies at night. And so sometimes it jumps up by 2 because we've added both one more enemy during the day and also an enemy at night. And roughly speaking, this means that as the days go up, there are more enemies, but it happens at a rate that reflects what the player's been doing. So if you've been playing kind of slow and taking it easy, the game won't get hard as quickly for you as a player who's just trying to, like I think Fall Down did this, speed run all the plague hearts. And then like that is a great way to sort of send this number skyrocketing very quickly, and the game will try and catch up with you.
Because even the characters who like for instance, even if I just only played Law here all the time, even though she can max out the amount of standing that she can get to progress herself towards Citizen and Hero, she actually behind the scenes, if I keep playing as her and I keep destroying plague hearts as her, keep completing missions as her, all that stuff, she invisibly is still gaining standing in the background, and she's still contributing to the difficulty of the game. So basically, there's no difference between switching characters a lot and switching characters rarely. Either way, you still progress just as quickly as you would otherwise, right?
Yep. There's also a built-in like a fail-safe mechanism. So if somebody dies in your community, the amount of standing that it took to get them to leader, you'll notice the bottom of that graph didn't say total standing right now. It said highest recorded. So when somebody dies, we actually lower the standing that we use in game. And we don't make the difficulty any easier, but it stops getting harder until you've earned standing back equal to that which you've lost. And so the game has this little bit of dynamism built into it, where if you start to get a couple of big losses in, it'll actually wait to get hard until after you've caught back up. So you get a little bit of breathing room.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we are about 3/4 of the way through our time, and this is probably actually a really good time to ask Anna a few questions, because we know that we've got a modding community out there that actually some of the things that we've been doing, there are people who have modded their games to advance the difficulty further, to mess with what difficulty does, and we've kind of made a lot of changes under the surface that might really affect the way that community works. Now, while we don't like formally support mods, we definitely don't have a problem with them, and we love the fact that we've got an audience out there that is so engaged and is so involved in our game that they're really interested in actually cracking it open, messing with it themselves. So we thought this might actually be a good stream for Anna to just sort of give like a high level sense of what kinds of changes under the hood we had to make in order to make this work, because it might be useful to maybe some of the more technical members of our community. Anna, do you want to sort of launch into that?
Yeah, so high level, every difficulty is controlled by like one configuration file in the game, right? Called a scenario. So what we did is when we split this out into 3 different sliders for each difficulty, those scenarios are now broken out into an action section, a community section, and a map section. And so those have different variables for each of the different sliders. When you start a game now, it actually loads up all of the difficulties that you've selected and then mushes them together into like one scenario in memory. So each of those sections is loaded. So if you said, I want my map on Nightmare, then it loads the Nightmare difficulty and takes just the map section out of it. And so those are put together. It does the same thing for music. There's a couple of different settings that are taken from both the community and the combat. Yeah, I think that's the high level. I could go deeper.
That's the thing. It's like we could go deep as we want. We know that most of our audience won't understand what you're talking about, but hopefully we want to sort of give people a sort of at least a starting point for understanding what to look for when if basically if this is going to invalidate a bunch of mods that they've really liked and they want to catch back up with us again.
Probably the second most important detail, the one that I just missed here, is that we use a system for buffing your community and for your characters. And there's all sorts of buffs and debuffs also that are all active at the same time. Those are actually directly mushed together from those 3 sections now into like one big table when the game is running. So that's probably the biggest change, is that we had to split out all of our buffs and rearrange them to make sense onto these 3 difficulty levels. Or 3 difficulty sliders.
We did get a question for. I just attracted a whole bunch of zombies. I'm gonna get out of here. We did get a question during Brian's chat. XBlue555 asked, does this take into account the characters that are taken from past plays, or does it only count when you start new? So I think they're talking about how we accumulate standing over time, like. Basically, when do we actually reset it? Is it when we switch maps? Is it when we at what point do we actually start over at 0 again, Brian?
It's pretty much just when you make a new community. If you move maps with a community that you've already got, your standing comes with you, right? And so the difficulty is going to be sort of updated in real time when you get to that map with how much progress you've made. This is why the game feels very different with a new community, because your standing is zeroed out, and so you're intentionally seeing a dialed back version of the experience to give you a little bit of time to get your feet under you. Less a nightmare.
Yeah, so that's why. So players who have been playing a forever community and they've been changing maps a lot, you probably already noticed this, that your experience when you started your very first community on a brand new map was extremely different from the experience when you moved maps after having developed a community a ton on another map, and that's going to remain true when you change change difficulties under the new system. Let's see here. So Guar here has a question. I was going to save this for a couple of streams from now, but maybe since we've got Brian right here, maybe we should just get it answered. Guar asks, any nerfs on hostile nightmare enclaves? Those headshots in the dark surrounded by zombies sometimes are a problem. Do you want to talk about some of the changes we've made, Brian?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I agree. Getting this feedback for forever. We've been talking about it for forever. There was like a long-standing bug. We just kept on adding feedback from like people in the company, as well as like folks on Discord and folks on Reddit. Like there was a clear consensus coming up around this. But there's a trick to it, right? Because there are some folks who insist that it's awesome to have there be extra challenging things in Nightmare. None of us are happy with that difficulty coming from something that feels cheap. It should feel fair. And doing that in a fair way without adding to complexity of how the characters work is actually pretty tricky. So we dialed in a couple of places and made some changes to the hostile AI, specifically in Nightmare. So their accuracy at long range is now massively diminished. Right around 60 meters, it starts to really go close to 0. And they're also going to take a little bit of time to quote unquote get on target. So they're going to have a really hard time hitting you with their first few shots. On green, the phrase few shots means more than on Nightmare, where it probably means like 2. And so the higher your action difficulty is, the faster it'll be that they get on target. But it'll still take them a few shots, whereas right now they can sort of get on target right away. And we also lower their accuracy at long range. It should also take the weapon type into account a little bit more. An AI with a shotgun is not going to be able to magically snipe you at 60 meters as if they were using like a lock-on missile.
Okay, cool. So we've actually got So not only is are we giving the player new access to control their difficulty, but we're also making some tweaks to, like Brian already talked us through, the fact that that the way difficulty progresses over time and with progress, how that changes, and we're also making the nightmare experience just a little bit more fair. Not really significantly that much easier, especially once you've been engaged with these guys for a while and they have gotten on target with you. They're still going to be able to headshot you. They're still going to be able to knock you down pretty good, but it doesn't feel like they can just come out of nowhere and just be super cheap. So, okay, we've only got about 10 minutes left, and I feel like we haven't quite covered everything that we've been showing on the difficulty screen. There's there's a lot to take in here. So we've talked about the fact that we've got the zombies attacking me. What the heck? I guess I shouldn't have been sniping that horde that was really, really far away.
With X difficulty on Nightmare, you make the most noise when you shoot.
That is true. I'm gonna go get upstairs, and then we can have our little chat here. Okay, so I'm just gonna let my friends take care of the zombies. Meantime, here's the difficulty screen. So we talked about the fact that we've got action difficulty, we've got community difficulty, we've got map difficulty. We've got these 3 different sliders. One thing we haven't talked about quite yet is how many notches are on these sliders. Susan, do you wanna talk a little bit about what's going on here?
Yeah, the chat's just exploded with everyone asking us what these question marks are. Trust me, we saw. I think that that 5th pip might have something to do with me and Geoffrey's hair color.
So we don't have a name for it yet, not formally. I know that people in the community have they've come up with their own names for what they would like to have at the end of our difficulty sliders here. But for right now, we don't have a name for this feature. This feature is not coming out on the 21st. The 21st is going to have these question marks. Those question marks are what you're going to see when the game when update 21 arrives and you get difficulty sliders. So we're going to need a little bit more time to complete this process. But we're already at work on this. So just give us a little bit of time and we'll have a little bit more to add to this difficulty screen. So as you can see, all of these sliders can go to a new maximum, but unfortunately right now we can't accept them. You have to be a little bit lower before you can hit the accept button because this new notch doesn't mean anything yet. So I'm looking forward to this. I think this is actually one of the more exciting things that we've gotten to announce. Players, they've been basically filling up our wish list and our comments and everything with requests for more and greater difficulty. So I think you can probably, I think everybody, we haven't said it exactly out loud, but I think everybody can take some implications about how much harder this is likely to be.
I've seen some amazing alternative names in the chat here, and 2020 Zone is a very front runner right now. It's pretty good.
My favorite name for it is Ludicrous Zone, but that's just me. I don't think that's going to be the final name.
For the record, I wanted Rainbow Unicorn Zone, but nobody was really into that.
Yeah, unfortunately. We've got a question from the chat. Could we restate how legacy boons work? Even after they've played, if you played 99 days and you change at the last minute, we've got a lot of latecomers, asking about that. If you change the difficulties, what actually happens to your boons? Anna, do you know? Are you the one who knows the answer to that question, or should we ask Brian?
Can you restate the question?
The question is: let's say I am playing. I have just started a game on, let's say, standard, and I've chosen my boons, and then I come in here and I basically and I raise my difficulty to dread across the board. No, sorry, wait. Vice versa. Now I'm actually confusing myself about what I'm asking. There's a way you can change the difficulty and invalidate your boons. Can we state out loud for players how that works? Because I can't even describe the scenario myself very well. I don't know who to ask. Maybe it's Anna, maybe it's Brian. But players, they have a lot of anxiety over the idea that they're going to maybe lower their difficulty and as a result no longer have access to the boons that they've acquired, that they've designated for themselves.
So if you raise your difficulty to a point where you don't have those boons unlocked anymore, then you will no longer have them for this community that you're on. Currently in the game, and this is unfortunate, we didn't have time to address this really. If you lower your difficulty back down, you don't get those boons back. So you only really need to worry if you're raising your difficulty up past the level at which you've unlocked boons.
Okay. So yeah, so right now in the game, it's we have not made any changes to the way that works. And so you will invalidate your boons if you raise your difficulty to the point where those boons are no longer valid. And there isn't currently a way to sort of get them back as you retract. but we're aware that the audience has noticed this problem, and they've asked us about it, and so that is definitely a thing that we're aware of that we would love to address. Do you think that's about a fair way to describe it?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and so if there's any last-minute questions that are popping up in the chat, we'd love to address them. Otherwise, we can just run around and talk about whatever we want.
What is all of y'all's favorite combinations to play this on?
That's a really good way to end, Susan. I really that's a good question.
Yeah.
So, Susan, why don't you start us off with where you like to play?
All right, I like Nightmare Action and green on everything else because I love running into giant piles of crazy zombies and then being able to, deal with the consequences of my brass actions. I am not a stealthily player. I love Leroy Jenkins style gameplay. So it's great because I can turn around and then loot a ton of stuff, refocus, and then go back in again and do more stupid stuff. So that is my favorite thing I've been playing all month. And I can't wait to play it on my main games. That's me. Let's see. Anna, what's your favorite combo to play on?
It's funny. I really like this feature, but I'm the sort of player that just takes the difficulty as is, right? So I like the basic difficulty selection, and I just take right now Dread, and I'm working my way up to Nightmare.
Well, and that's actually where I am in the in my game at home. I'm playing at Dread, hoping I can get good enough at my own game that I can raise it to Nightmare. But whenever we're doing playtests, I'm actually really similar to Susan. I usually like to play Nightmare Action, Community Green, and then map. I'll usually put map up to something like Dread. Make it make each item that I get a little bit more special because there's fewer of them out there, fewer cars out there. So this is probably actually the balance that I like the best. Brian, where do you play?
So I really enjoy focusing on the community and morale and sort of survival simulation stuff. I do also really like our combat, but not enough to really stick with Nightmare. So I tend to put action on Dread and then dial community up to Nightmare, and then map I sort of vacillate, but I usually stick around Nightmare or Dread.
So, okay, I am simulating Brian's comfort zone right here. And
yeah, it's all right.
And Brant, when you've been playtesting this, you got a favorite setting?
Yeah, I always set action at Nightmare and community and map difficulties at either standard or green, and then I instantly regret my choice because I'm killed.
And then you can panic and go down here.
and then I take my action down farther.
Cool. Well, then we've got only a few minutes left, and so thank you so much, audience, for hanging out here with us. We're so excited for the point where we can actually release this. Now, it's going to be early this fall when this actually comes out. We don't have a solid release date yet. We're still, dotting some I's and crossing some T's to make sure this is actually ready for everybody to experience at their homes. And so, so we'll be able to, hopefully, as we get closer, keep following us stream after stream. We've got a lot more to reveal. This is just one feature that is landing in Update 21. We've got a new bounty pack that's going to be landing, and we're going to go over that with Mark and Zoe next week. The week after that, we're going to talk about some of the other smaller features that we've added, including at least one that I think people are going to be extremely excited about. We're going to do that with Eric Anderson as our guest. And so we've got a lot coming up. So definitely, if you haven't subscribed to us yet, try subscribing. That's how you can make sure that you're up on all these updates. And so we've still got a ton more to talk about. But I really want to thank the guests who came in today and give them all a chance to say goodbye. So Susan, do you want to say goodbye to the crowd?
So long, farewell. Thanks for having me, everybody. Obviously, we knew about this back when we announced Green. It is really hard biting our tongue and not spoiling it. So really excited about Survivors, really excited about the extra hard Nightmare 2, we call it Under the Hood difficulty. And so excited to finally share it with y'all. So see you soon.
Brian, you want to say goodbye?
Sure. I just want to thank y'all for being a part of this ongoing wonderful experience of having a community of engaged players. It's the best. We're doing this because we're listening and we're trying to keep on making this wonderful zombie survival experience, and also of being us making zombie survival experience to get a little meta. So thank you for being a part of it. Look forward to seeing y'all keep being a part of it, and see you next time.
Anna, do you want to say goodbye?
So I've been working on this feature for quite a while, and with the work from home situation due to the pandemic, it's basically all I've been thinking about. So I'm super excited that everyone gets to see it now and is going to get to play it soon.
And Brant, do you want to say goodbye?
I'd like to say that I'm really proud of the team for what they've done, the hard work they put in. Susan, fantastic job leading that team. Way to go. Thanks for continuing to make our game better.
And with that, I think I'll just say, one last thing. As always, we've got our ongoing partnership with the Red Cross. That is still going on. We're still in the middle of summertime. We haven't hit the first day of fall yet. So those of you who haven't seen it yet, go to stateofdecay.com/Red Cross. You can see, the program that we got going on there, and definitely, give blood. This is the hardest time for hospitals and stuff to try to keep stocked up on blood. It doesn't last very long, and so they need their constant donations. So please go out and do that. And with that, I think we're gonna wrap this up. So next week we're gonna reveal the new Open Range pack, and we'll see you all then. And now, 20 seconds of fire.
Awkwardness.
Awkward fire. The fires.
Awkward?
The fires of awkwardness.
Word?
Word?
The fires of awkwardness that's my new band name.
The
Playing
fires of
that. I love it. Oh man.